stopping snake oil with smaller healthcare providers, how we can address security with actionable plans, and maximum value. So, what's been going on? Healthcare has been the most affected industry by ransomware, data breaches, and hacks. I take a look on the news every week. There's yet another provider that's been hacked. In a lot of cases, providers have had to shut down, and patients were not even able to get hold of their medical records. And so what we've noticed in our work is the guidance provided to many providers has not addressed what organizations actually need to do to protect their patients and themselves. There hasn't been that specific list and tool set they can use. So why are we here? There have been a lot of snake oil companies out there that have only provided risk assessments that cost a lot of these smaller providers tens of thousands of dollars and don't deliver anything of value. And worse, taking money out of the risk management plans, aka negative value. We want to change that equation. We want to provide maximum value and immediate returns and help these smaller organizations spend their scarce resources more wisely and give them something they can use as a baseline. Why am I here? Because we're sick and tired of hearing about this. I've been in healthcare InfoSec since 1998. How I got started in this industry was because I got rid of one of these people. And I repeated it at two larger organizations. And part of the reason why I'm a CISO is because I helped get rid of snake oil providers at several organizations. So what I have today is 22 years of experience in a shortened format designed to give an understanding of our challenges and, more importantly, what we can do to fight back. And just an FYI, you're going to see a lot of text here, and you're not going to see as many memes from me as you normally do. Why? Because I want to give people viewing this presentation or people that download these slides something they can print out and put on their desk without worrying about if picture of Tiger King offends somebody. So what assumptions are we making? We're going to make 5. First, we're going to be talking about small medical offices or critical access hospitals. Second, that the person in charge of risk management plans not going to know computers well. They don't need to, they don't have to. And we're going to have computers accessing a lot of on-site and off-site resources with a lot of applications, all with different usernames and passwords. And more importantly, no one has 100% of a clue as to what is going on, much like the old parable of the 3 blind men and the elephants. So what's our agenda today? We're going to talk about risk assessments, and there is a tool download. We have a quantitative risk assessment tool we developed in Excel that we're going to make sure you can download along with this. We're going to talk about how to use that to develop the risk management plan that you need. We're going to talk about policies and procedures and how to develop them and what you actually need. We're also going to talk about physical security. Then we're going to talk about the Healthcare ISAC and the Health Sector Coordinating Council, who they are, and what resources they have that can help you. We're going to talk about electronic medical record systems, what to do to maintain them and why, password managers, PCI DSS, aka Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, and why keeping up here is important, firewalls, VPNs, and how not to make them your worst enemy. We're also going to talk about the zettabyte file system and why you need this for local file storage and why that's very important, and also cloud-based backups, aka a good defense against ransomware, and our friends at Samba, why this works for authentication, endpoint detection and response, why this instead of antivirus, flash drive encryption, good encrypted email, good 2-factor authentication, our friends at CT Update with the WSUS offline update, or as we put it, a friend to BYOD and a friend to data caps. How to handle vendor management with, again, a free tool download from us and a callback policy on cashback or wire transfers. And we're going to sum up with training that doesn't suck, which is a lot harder than it sounds, always having someone to call, and of course, thanking you for your time and the opportunity to speak with you today. So, risk assessments. First things first, we always advocate doing these internally with a little bit of outside help instead of just having one done by an outside firm. Reason why is you need to know your business well and know where your holes are. And the most critical part we found is to be honest about your compliance status. Truth is, if you're not, you're going to get in trouble with the OCR, aka the Office for Civil Rights from the Department of Health and Human Services, and now your insurance company if you're not. And this is not a death sentence. This is not an IRS audit. The goal is to improve. And I've even had conversations with OCR about that. And more importantly, the other reason you want to do it internally is because no one's going to tell an outsider where the security holes are or where they think their issues are. Why? Because people think outsider, they think an auditor. And if you bring in an outsider, people are going to clam up and not say anything. This is no knock on the big firms I've worked with, but outsiders don't get answers, insiders do. That's why you do it internally. Because if you don't know where your problems are, you're not being honest with yourself, and you're not leading to something that can help develop a good risk management plan. Also, we do it quantitatively. The reason why is because we have to prioritize how we address risks. So part of our tool download is we put one together that was based on the CMS Systems Readiness Assessment tool that does risk evaluation based upon factors of likelihood, impact, velocity, potential income loss, and reputational impact. And what you end up with is, for each of your risks, a score. And what do you do with these scores? Because let me tell you, I first started off doing risk assessments. I would see 50 or 60 low, mediums, or highs, and you couldn't even know what to prioritize. And it ended up becoming a qualitative, not quantitative exercise. So this is why we do things quantitative with scores. Why? Because in the supplied spreadsheet, there's a pivot table for identifying your top risks. And we do an internal rule called the 20% cutoff. Reason being is we figured out that if you do the top 20%, you get most of the remaining 80% as part of the plan. And what you do, you don't have to be technical, you develop a set of methods and processes to address them as part of a plan. And you always have to include your communication plan. This has been the greatest failing I've found in information security when you try to address risk. You have to go out, you have to talk to people, and you have to do this over and over and over and over again and be able to give a presentation. And with my team, we call it the 30-second rule. If you can't explain it in 30 seconds and tie it back to the mission and values of the organization and talk about how it benefits the organization, you really shouldn't be doing it. So we have to get down to that level with our communication plans and talk about why this is important. And most importantly, assign accountable parties to make sure things get followed up on, and keep following up and documenting. Keep a spreadsheet. Even the most non-technical person in the world can use Microsoft Excel or LibreOffice, your choice. So brings us to our policies and procedures, and you need to have these because they're required by the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, better known as HIPAA, no two Ps. And you should have these by identified risk and develop and release them in that order. Because if you try and do this all at once and you don't do it as part of your overall plan or with a communication plan, no one's going to follow them. People are going to go, well, why am I doing this policy? Why do I care? Unless you tie it back to identified risks with a good communication plan, a policy ultimately means nothing. So we actually recommend the policy template provided by the Department of Health and Human Services, and we provide the link for you right here. So bring up physical security as well, and this is something I've found from numerous risk assessments I've done. A lot of organizations treat building management separate from the enterprise, aka I've had enough conversations with executives where I have been told, we think physical security is out of scope. Well, guess what? We have an opioid crisis. It is. Also, what we found with physical security and building management is the equipment lives on much longer life cycles. That means while we've done a great job with our desktops and EMRs, we have a lot of unpatched machines with network access running older Windows versions that are running our physical infrastructure. And realistically, that Amiga 2000 that was running the HVAC for a school district in Michigan was more secure because it didn't have internet access. Yeah, you could dial in, but it was more secure than being able to remote in off the internet and being able to change a building's environmentals. I mean, come on now, Cult of the Dead Cow did that 25 years ago. we should be guarding against that. So anything with a network connection that protects data or protects an environment is now in scope. A lot of executives, again, when I first started off in this business, tried to restrict scope to just the EMR, but a good risk assessment showed that physical security really was in scope. So you have to include these in your risk assessments and protect adequately. Because again, everything's a whole, and we should have learned our lesson from CDC when they did this. So brings us to a couple organizations that can help out smaller organizations, which are the Healthcare ISAC and the Health Sector Coordinating Council. Put their links up here for you. They provide excellent content, mailing lists, and threat intelligence for healthcare organizations. And Healthcare ISAC has actually some very reasonable pricing now for smaller organizations. And the HSCC provides significant guidance, content, recommendations, and a lot of coordination between members, and a lot of in-person conferences and opportunities to work with some great people in the industry. So we highly recommend you're a smaller organization, join one or two of these. And we highly recommend that more than spending money on threat intel software. So brings me to EMR maintenance. Let me be very clear. If you're hosting an EMR, and you're a small organization, don't. Right now, they're getting so complex that they're so expensive to maintain. Security is now very challenging. You have regulatory requirements that require a team. And a bigger health system or a large service bureau, they can do this for you and do it better. And tools such as privacy and diversion monitoring that a lot of larger ones have, they can also be leveraged for your organization as well. So EMRs are now incredibly complex. There's a reason why a couple of the largest EMR companies offer that remote hosted option. That's the way of the future, because doing it on your own is an incredibly complex task. And brings me to password managers. I've worked in a lot of industries, mostly healthcare, mostly defense, however. No other industry I've worked in has had an emphasis on having numerous incompatible logins. DoD went through this about 15 years ago. And DoD got themselves mostly cleaned up. Healthcare hasn't. Why? Because healthcare has all these different applications, and when you talk to the vendors about federation or single sign-on, they look at you like a dog looking at a card trick. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? I actually have to do this? What, SAML? I wish I was kidding. So this means you've got to get very good with password managers and make sure your team knows how to use them. Even the one in Google Chrome is a significant improvement over what we have now, and is now an absolute must for your team members to have. And again, when most of the applications that we have in healthcare can actually use Google Chrome, it'll be a great benefit. You still have a significant amount running on Internet Explorer, which has been replaced, twice now? So, brings me to another point here. Brings me over to payment card industry data security standards. Very few people pay cash for the doctor anymore. Maybe in some more rural areas, or with, quite frankly, the Amish, they'll pay cash, but very few other people will. So many of the credit card machines in your doctor's office have not kept up with the times because people think PCI compliance is one and done. So big hint for you, it isn't. And that PCI compliant device that's PCI 2.0 compliant doesn't take chip cards. And one of the areas where you're going to find is customer demand. People want their credit cards to work like they do at Walmart or CVS. And I've actually heard customer complaints about this. They want the Walmart experience. They want the CVS experience. They want their chip card working, and they really care about credit card security. So what you want to do is talk to your bank, talk to your app vendors, get the latest point-to-point encryption devices in your practice. Literally, they will give them to you. However, you need to have someone that just goes around, checks the device quarterly, and makes sure they stay updated. That way you can actually have some reasonable degree of PCI compliance. And also, if you get P2P, that means you take your network pretty much out of scope for anything you do with PCI compliance, and more importantly, you protect your patient's credit cards. Because you want to violate someone's trust? Have a couple $1,000s of PC components show up on their credit card after they go to your office. We want to avoid that. Also, want to talk about patient payments. This is at the point where if you're doing this on your own, you shouldn't. Get a hold of one of the revenue cycle vendors out there to handle your payments and provide that patient portal. Don't assume that risk. Don't try and waste time trying to be PCI compliant. You also don't want to be in a position where you're writing down credit card numbers or recording them on voicemails, both of which affect your PCI compliance status. Realistically, I believe in risk transference by paying for a PCI compliant vendor is the best move an organization can make. Because again, when you think about it, you think about the little things. Somebody sees a credit card number written down and they're not exactly scrupulous, they're going to copy down that credit card number. Or if they hear a voicemail because someone has a old voicemail password that is on the wall, they'll copy down the credit card number. We want to avoid credit card fraud, and this is how you do it. There's a lot of companies out there that do great work. They'll do it for you at a reasonable price and provide you something reasonably decent for PCI compliance. And this is my favorite statement. I've heard this statement for the past 20 years, but we have a firewall. Truth is, with a lot of ransomware attacks that have been happening, you open up port 3389, aka remote desktop, you might as well not have a firewall. And if you didn't patch it, you might as well not have one. So one of the most important lessons we learned over the past year is that remote access is a huge target. And there's actually been numerous successful attacks on both remote desktop and unpatched VPN software. And again, what we talk to our customers about continually is that same appliance that worked 5 years ago is not effective against modern threats. So this got exacerbated in a number of organizations when people realized, hey, guess what? I'm working from home, my spouse is working from home, and my kids are doing e-learning, and that router I got 5 years ago for wireless that I haven't changed, guess what? It's dying. Same thing happens with a lot of modern offices. As we switched to remote, we killed remote access. And the only people that really benefited from this were the companies reselling all the new equipment to people because the old stuff just didn't work. I'll be very clear about something else. Straight remote desktop is not effective. You will get owned. Bluekeep or not, you will get owned. So don't use it. You've got your RDS gateways, good solution. You've got OpenVPN on pfSense on that Core 2 Duo from 2006. That's going to do a better job than most of your appliances. Even Google Remote Desktop protects you better. That's got two-factor. And if you run RDP or old VPN, we learned a very important lesson with COVID. Say hello to ransomware because guess what? You're going to get it. So, brings me to another point here. One of my areas of focus over the past few years of my research has been HIPAA, aka confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. So what have we done a lot of over the past year? Confidentiality and availability. Why? Because we need to securely get access to equipment. We need to be able to do our jobs remotely. And a lot of people have assumed integrity comes with the use of secure transport protocols like TLS. Well, that's not really the case. We also have to worry about integrity. Why? I'm going to go into a real use case I got from work. We have patients that need 30 to 40 years of medical records. Normally, we talk about people needing 10 years, and most of the regulations out there talk about, oh, you need to keep them as much as clinically effective. Well, when somebody gets pediatric craniofacial surgery to affect the shape of their skull, guess what? You need to keep 40 years of medical records around. And the probability of this data becoming corrupt over the years is very, very high. And give you a perfect example of it. 2000, I was sitting having a conversation with my cousin. My cousin is a surgeon in Hackensack, New Jersey. And he was talking to me about how he prints out photos and keeps them in a photo album. And I'm like, Sydney, why are you doing that, man? He goes, because 20 years from now, I want to be able to read them, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to. So that thought from my cousin Sid has stuck in my head and has actually been a determinant in how I act, because realistically, I have to make sure now that the files that we keep on patients, especially those that are going to need it 40 years from now, because a surgeon is going to need to see the results of a skull surgery from back then becomes very important. So integrity is no longer just transport protocols. We talk about file corruption and file integrity. And many of the common file systems don't do it at the file level. However, there's a lot that run ZFS that do. And they do a lot of checksumming on files that helps you detect and correct that. And there's a lot that you can get, not from a lot of large companies, but you can get them that can protect those files. So, brings me to another point here, which is about cloud-based backups and why you need them. So, I've had the opportunity over the past couple of years to do several presentations with Steve Long, who happens to be the CEO of Hancock Regional Health in Hancock, Indiana, aka probably the only health system that's openly talked about what happened with their ransomware attack and has gone on record with doing so. So they actually came right out and said, this is why we paid. We paid because it came down to recovery time and getting systems back to take care of patients. So if and when you get attacked, and more than likely it's going to be when, not if, you need to protect those backups. And I can also tell you I work on cyber insurance policies as part of my job. And one of the major insurance brokers now has a ransomware addendum to their policy writer that specifically asks how you store your backups and if you store them separately under a different set of credentials. And they also ask if you test them. Why? Because numerous ransomware actors figured out, hey, you store the backups on the network and encrypt them first. So your average cloud provider that has good HIPAA backups, as they call them, they're going to have better security. But again, the insurance companies are getting really smart about this as well. So get smart along with the insurance companies. So brings me to Samba. Many of the apps we have still require AD authentication. It's a fact of life. Realistically, you don't need to have a full AD environment. You can run, if you need to run it, run a small VM, run your Samba. It's pretty easy to integrate with your NAS appliances and Windows, and honestly, saves you some money on Microsoft licensing. So, brings me to secure email. We need to be able to send email to patients, and you can't make the assumption they're going to read on anything remotely secure. And I'm going to come right out and say this. The secure portal apps that I use right now do not support patient satisfaction. I have twins. My twins, let's be honest, you get twins, they have health issues. They have to see lots of specialists. And I remember with my wife having to deal with a couple of secure email systems for specialists we were sending my son to. And I remember my wife getting upset and basically me trying to read through a secure email provided by a major children's hospital made me want to throw the computer at the wall, because it was the complicating factor of I'm worried about my kids. My wife is sitting there worried, which amplifies my worry factor probably 100-fold. And complicating it with a bad user interface or bad secure email, that's not good. This is an area we need to improve. And I'll be honest about something else. Providers don't read multiple inboxes. They read one. Why? Because they don't have time to read anything other than the one. I've worked with doctors for over 20 years, and I can tell you, after having numerous stand-up meetings in clinics, literally running with them from place to place, assuming they're going to read more than one place to do anything is a failed assumption. And the current vertical solutions, in addition to having user interfaces that make patients and providers angry, they are very expensive. So you stick with good secure providers that provide the encryption, mobile access, and a simple secure portal. You don't need to have the quote-unquote HIPAA Porsche package. And quite frankly, most of your patients don't care. Because what's going to happen is they're going to copy and paste the information somewhere anyway. So give them a good basic thing that works, that you've tested, use that, and if you try and force a user interface on someone and say HIPAA, no one's going to care. They're going to find a way around it anyway. So when it comes to EDR, I'll be very clear about something else. Antivirus in healthcare is DOA. Why? Because there's too much interference with applications, and most of your software packages out there in healthcare that run come with an exceptions list, which means that it takes me about 30 seconds on Google to find the exceptions list to know where I can place custom malware. So you want to get rid of the ability for the exceptions to run. That's why we like EDR better. It also integrates better with SIMs and log management, integrates with tools like OS Query to provide your good analytics, and you're spending less time figuring out why your apps don't work because of an exceptions list, and making exceptions that, quite frankly, give an open door for malware. Because if I know where your AV program's not going to scan, where do you think I'm going to put the malware? And major challenge I have with flash drives has been proprietary drives. So 4 years ago, I left my job at Temple Health. I had a bunch of photos stored on one of my computers there, including the photos of the birth of my kids. And I needed to transport those in an encrypted flash drive, home, so I did. And when I upgraded to Mac OS High Sierra last year, I realized I got a warning that said, the application you use is no longer for decrypting your flash drive isn't going to work with future Mac OS upgrades. So I had to go and take 26 gigs of photos and transport them somewhere else, which was a major challenge for me. And for a lot of people, they're just not going to do it. And also, we bring up significant churn in the encryption vendor market, which means that data you have now isn't going to be decryptable 10 years later because of a lot of OS constraints. So realistically, open source solutions work because at least you're going to have a better chance of reading your data with a solution that's kept up and kept maintained. I've used a lot of proprietary encryption software out there, and I can tell you the open source stuff still works. And the proprietary stuff, I might be able to read it one day. So it brings me over to two-factor. And if there's one factor that stopped the majority of hack attempts, it's good two-factor authentication like Duo, Authy, or YubiKeys, all of which work very, very well. And this is especially true for healthcare. And again, part of my background, I've been doing this CISO thing for 12 years in healthcare. A number of the phishing attacks that we've seen, they use compromised accounts. Why? Because it gives that illusion of trust. And so what happens? The attacks that I've seen, very specifically, somebody gets a hold of compromised credentials from another health system, they spam every health system account they got. And they do it via the secured email system, so it bypasses your anti-spam protection and, quite frankly, bypasses your email border gateways because it'll literally drop it in right at the internal mail gateways, which is not good because it means you've bypassed a whole bunch of protection. And also, these non-two-factor provide access to internal networks for further analysis, recon, etc. Yeah, we've seen it, and it is a gateway to ransomware. So another thing we've done to talk about how to block this is the WSUS offline updates. So one thing we've had to do is if you get a device out there that you've got to quickly patch, you have two choices. Either you could wait for all the online update tools and kill your bandwidth, or you could put it on a flash drive, put it in, and go do something else. We choose to put it in quickly and go do something else and get the machine up and patched quickly. A lot of devices that come out there don't come with the latest patches. You want to put something on the network quickly, put this on, get the patches on. And I'm not talking just desktop PCs, I'm talking very huge, expensive devices that do support Microsoft patches. This works better than anything I've used, and I've been doing this for 20 years. So it brings me over to our friend Mr. Vendor Management, or Miss Vendor Management. You need to perform risk analysis of your vendors. So, big problem we have here, and I've had numerous discussions with most of the big medical device vendors out there, is there are a huge amount of divergent requirements out there because the regulations talk about having the requirements, they don't say how. They talk about how to do it, but they don't actually provide good implementation steps. So another gift we're giving you today is use ours. We put ours up on the internet. You can download them. You can use them. Everyone from small providers to some of the largest healthcare systems in the world use ours. Why? Because a lot of vendors are not going to answer questionnaires. And the truth is that they've been getting a ton of questionnaires. They've had to dedicate numerous resources to literally answer the same questions over and over and over again. And those are resources that are being taken from actually securing the products. However, a lot more of these vendors are getting certified, and it makes our job easier if they go for different certification criteria. Works really well for us, actually. So, brings me to something else, and I know it sounds like I'm jumping around a little bit, but this all fits together. So, we talk about a callback policy. So at this point, coming back with account compromise, everything else, no one should be allowing wire transfers without an established relationship, speaking with these people on the phone, and having someone confirm, even if internal, with the supposed executive asking for the rush wire transfer to Hong Kong, and confirming the changes of someone trusted. Every attack we've seen relies upon impersonation of trusted executives to coerce people into sending money because they are busy in a meeting and they need that money now. And yes, it does have to go to Hong Kong. So we're very clear about having that callback policy in place. And we found it actually reduces your BECs by almost 100%. Which brings me to training, because again, getting people trained on that leads to good training elsewhere. I'm going to be very clear about this. Most security training sucks, and the customers hate it. And I've heard it from the C-suite all the way down to the hourly employees. Unless it directly ties into their job or affects them, they're not going to care. So what we do about it is we keep it short, sweet, and relevant. My goal when a security advisory comes out is 200 words at most, and discuss what people need to do. And truth be told, I had a case last week where a warning came out from a federal agency. It didn't talk about what people needed to do. We took the 4 pages from the government warning, turned it into 85 words. And we took the rest of the wording to put wording at the end for what people needed to do about SIM swapping. Did that in 100 words. So in 200 words, we got the point across about SIM swapping and what people needed to do, and provided relevant action and a callback for if you have further questions, contact us. And we helped numerous people protect their accounts against SIM swapping. That is relevant. And also, if you make your training longer than 3 to 5 minutes, you will lose people. I have had this discussion with someone who really knows what they're talking about, who is Dr. Michelle Janney, our Chief Operating Officer. And when we did our training at my organization, she is the first person I sent the training to, because I kept it to that parameter. As long as she approved, I was happy. But again, this is what we talk about. You make it long, you lose people. And anytime you put a policy out, it will come with a training plan. It will come with a communication plan, because if you don't, you will lose people, because people aren't going to know what to do, and they're not going to be able to get the 200-word explanation. Again, ties back to the 30-second mission and values that we always do. And also, you've always got to be available. Make sure that you or your trusted team members are available, because when something happens, people are having a very bad day. And I'm going to be very clear about this. Do not be the condescending edgelord. Do not be the BOFH. Do not be the gatekeeper. You will upset people. You will find yourself out of a job. Always respond to your customer requests, and always say please and thank you. Those elementary school teachers you had, they were right. And it works really, really well. But again, and I'm going to sum it up in 4 words. Don't be a dick. Always be available. And with that, thank you very, very much. And I want to thank a couple people who I've been working with over the past couple years. Shatrice Romero, who is the program director for the Indiana Executive Committee on Cybersecurity under Governor Holcomb, and John Ritchie, formerly of the FBI, now the Senior Director of Cybersecurity for the American Hospital Association. We're all doing a lot out there to help people, and again, we're always available. Find us, find me. I will take the time, because the most important thing to keep in mind is We have trust relationships at stake, and we need to do whatever we can to keep that trust going. So, with that, thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you. Good afternoon. So, does anyone have any questions? So, I just got one from Seth. When is the book coming out? I'll put the link in there. Put the link in here. I just actually had a book come out not so long ago. So, I can get that really quickly for you. Memorize what this is. Okay, so in the chat, I just put a link to a book I just did a chapter on healthcare information security for that covers that. And so I have a question from Robert Wright. And that question is, what are some warning signs that you may have snake oil in your mist? And the biggest answer I can give you is, if someone says they can try and solve all your problems for you instantly, that's how you know you've got snake oil. Or someone claims to fix everything without talking to you or analyzing or trying to meet your needs. That is the number one largest sign. I'd say about 80% of the cases that seems to be the most effective. So I've in the question area some more. I've been answering the questions in line as well. So Peter Salas asked a question: does HIPAA have a set of standards that drive configuration baselines for the different health industries? And the answer to that question is no. It's pretty much one set of standards for everybody. And for David Bobrovsky, who asked a question, how do you get around antivirus requirements out of things such as disastigs that require it instead of an EDR that provides more value, exceptions to baselines? What have you seen as successful methods for this shift? I get on the phone with the vendors and flat out tell them we're using EDR. We're not using any issues with IO hooking. So the answer to there, and the Excel tool, Fahima, I see you in chat there. Famida, I'm sorry, is I did give them the link. It should be posted along with the presentation page. If not, I will tweet a link to it very soon. So just looking for any other questions here, and I don't see any that I haven't answered. So I'm looking at the chat here. Chat's pretty funny. So anyone else have any more questions they want to ask? I'm monitoring the question box right here. Okay, so Stephanie Domas, last question. What is the correct balance between process, people, and tools in cybersecurity? Your topic approaches cleaning up snake oil. This likely applies mostly to tools. Any wording of the right balance between the three? I often see more of an emphasis on tools than the other two. And my emphasis, this is always universal, always start with a good risk assessment, and any tool you get has to come with a plan for people and processes to maintain it. So, Eric Van Houten, what are aspects of clinical applications that you look for during purchase decisions from a security point of view? Answer there is, I want to make sure that the vendor has a commitment to address vulnerabilities. that they have an emphasis on staying current, and most importantly, that they keep the lines of communication open in case there is. Thank you very much. I'll stick around in the chat box to answer more questions.